any steps in this area, but we're seriously considering. To be quite honest, there are a number of these options that you find being advertised, and people are actually making a lot of money in some of these enterprises. We want to be very careful that whatever we do to offset our carbon footprint is genuine, verifiable, can be monitored, and we're looking at several options, and I expect in the next few months we will be able to adopt a policy by which we come up with a carbon neutral operation in our travel.
Thank you. The gentleman over here.
Hi, Richard Black from the BBC. Perhaps I could ask Achim Steiner just to enlarge on the comments that he made there. It's quite clear from the summary for policymakers that if nothing changes in terms of the global regime, we're going to see emissions rise further and faster, greater use of coal, etc., etc. Yet you outlined your view that it is possible to turn that around. So could you give us a sort of roadmap for decarbonising the global economy relevant to industrialised countries, middle-ranking countries and the less developed countries, how you think things ought to proceed in the next decade or so?
In very simple terms, if we want to meet the targets that the IPCC has given us, it has also given us the numbers that need to be achieved in terms of removing greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. I mentioned the building sector, the transport sector, the energy generation sector, and also the agriculture and forestry sectors. In all of these sectors, the IPCC and indeed Sir Nicholas Stern also with his report and many other scientific reports that have contributed to our knowledge, including from the private sector, have shown areas in where we can make gains. The simple light bulb example has become, if you want, a symbol for that measure, where with one light bulb you can reduce your electricity consumption by 4/5. It is the simplest act almost for a consumer today, and there are countries who have replaced their entire stock of light bulbs already on this planet. There are corporations that are able to use their energy more efficiently. We can look at also the issue of transport. Why is it that in the year 2007, when we have technology to motor and power vehicles with 4 liters per 100 kilometers, we are still building and selling cars with 16, 18 liters per 100 kilometers? We have hybrid technology, we have others that have been in the pipeline for a long time. It is also time that industry and the private sector offer the market the products that will allow us to achieve those greenhouse gas emission reductions. And here the report makes a very important distinction between the economic mitigation potential and the market mitigation potential. The private sector, the consumer and the markets need signals that governments can give through legislation, incentives and subsidies that make sense from a carbon management perspective, but may not make sense from me as an individual or me as a corporation. That is why the IPCC, that is why the negotiations in Bali are so critical, because unless governments provide the markets of this world the right signals and the right incentives, these transitions that are listed in these reports will simply not happen, because the market alone cannot deliver. But the market with the right incentives and the right regulatory frameworks is perfectly capable of delivering gigatons of reductions in greenhouse gas emissions in the timelines that the IPCC has shown so very clearly in its report.
Thank you. Yes, right here.
Paul Cunningham from Irish Television. It's clear that the work of the IPCC has delivered momentum to politicians to do something. But there is a concern, is there not, that given the IPCC is not going to report for another 5 years, that the reports which are produced today and over the past 12 months will be old news by January and the momentum will be lost?
Well, the IPCC has a program of outreach, and we have been increasingly active in ensuring that both with our own small activities but also in partnership with other organizations, we spread the message. And that's not going to be over by January. In fact, if anything, it really starts in January. So I would say that over the next few years, this is going to be an increasingly important activity for us. We also have the possibility of some special reports being produced, and then the scientific community will be involved in preparing, if necessary, for a fifth assessment report. But I'd like to emphasize that we believe that it's absolutely essential for us to be much more engaged in outreach activities than has been the case earlier on. And we've tried to do that as effectively as possible, at least with the fourth assessment report.
Yeah, if I may compliment very briefly, because I think you are raising a very interesting question. IPCC is providing what is the best state of knowledge. But still, at the same time, it still raises a number of questions. And the scientists are not going to stay idle. They are going to work very, very hard to provide these answers. And they're not going to wait for 5 years. So some of the answers might be available in the next few months, some might take a few more years. But the scientific community is absolutely committed to continue to support the IPCC process and to provide the answers as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary General.
About this sustaining momentum, that's a very good process for policymakers like myself as Secretary General. There are some significant work done by scientists, but how to utilize these findings and assessment in a political or diplomatic negotiation, that will be job of the policymakers and Secretary General and other policymakers. Now, the United Nations General Assembly is now considering to have a thematic debate on this climate change issue again right after Bali meeting. That will provide us a good momentum for us to reflect and to think about our ways and strategy way forward. I was told that Dr. Pachauri, that the IPCC is now going to organize one Sustainable Development Summit in New Delhi next year, February. That will also provide a good opportunity for international community to talk about all these climate change issues. I'm going to continuously engage in this process.
Thank you. We have a question emailed from Metro, a newspaper in France, and to Dr. Pachauri. Does reducing CO2 emissions necessarily mean slower development for developing countries?